is Australia's most spectacular desert, the Simpson. It's a harsh and arid environment, and it's got these parallel sand dunes that run for hundreds of miles. The best time to see them is right now, at dawn.
It's got to be the coldest night I've spent for a long time, but I guess you got to expect it because this is the desert country and we're right in the middle of winter. Desert country in winter, it's a bit like that. I think tomorrow night I might get myself a fire. Right now, I'm right on the western edge of the Simpson Desert, and I'm going to travel from here right through Central Australia, up to Tanami, and finish up at Wave Hill. The only reason I'm doing this trip because a mad mate of mine up at Wave Hill asked me to come. Wrote me this letter. It belongs to the Wave Hill Cricket Club, and so do I. In fact, he's the captain. He asked me to come up to play a game of cricket. Here's what he says. The gentlemen selectors of the ancient and noble Royal Wave Hill Cricket Club, crikey, request and require the attendance in whites, the bush tucker man, to meet upon this sacred turf the champions of the Tanami Desert, the Hooker Creek Bush Turkey Cricket Club. It's going to be on the 16th. That's a few days down the track, so I reckon I'll make it. There's a bit more in Frank's letter too. P.S. He wants some seagulls. You see, up there in Central Australia where Wave Hill is, they don't have any seagulls, and everyone knows that any cricket ground worth its salt has got its fair share of seagulls. So, after a lot of trouble, I've got him a dozen seagulls. They're in here. We'll take them for a ride up to Wave Hill on the way. Tell you what, the things you do for your mates, I don't know. I'll be right.
If you're going to make a trip like this halfway across Australia, you might as well make it an interesting one and have a bit of a look at a few things along the way. And at this time of year, when the desert gets its annual rainfall, things really begin to happen.
Once you do start to get a bit of rainfall in the desert country, the reaction around the countryside is almost immediate, because what begins to happen is you get all this new grass growth, the spinifex change colour, you get a whole wash of greenery right throughout the sand dunes. One of the very, very early indicators that you've got rainfall is the emergence of paddy melons, and they grow on the sides of the road near the gutters where the water collects. Quite a few of them around. There's a patch up there, another one over there, small here. Pretty prolific at this time of year. These things are related to the watermelons, but unlike watermelons, you can't eat them. In fact, they're quite poisonous. Aboriginal people use them as a bush medicine. They'd heat them up like that over the fire, cut a hole in them, then squeeze the juice out to fix up ringworm and scabies and those sort of things. But like that, no go. I remember one old Aboriginal bloke One time I asked him about these things. I said, can you eat them? And he said, nah, rubbish food. Camel tucker, he said. Show them inside. It is there, all those seeds in it. Looks a bit like a melon. Smells like one too. But deceptive because poisonous. Leave them for the camels.
The camel, a horse designed by a committee, was first introduced into Australia in the mid-1800s by our early explorers and settlers. These days, they've multiplied to over 30,000 in the Northern Territory alone. But even so, they've never been a problem.
Well, there's one animal that really has adapted to the Australian desert country. They really have fitted in quite well. We could do the same, we'd have no trouble at all.
Heading west, the sand dunes begin to disappear, and gradually you find yourself amongst the McDonnell Ranges, and finally, Alice Springs itself. The Alice is a beaut spot. Only trouble is there are too many motor cars and a whole bunch of traffic lights. Goss's Bluff is only 100 miles west of Alice. Even though it's not an environmental reserve, it is a scientific reserve because it's pretty special in its own way.
The people who reckon they know about this sort of thing, the geologists and the seismologists and all those other ologists, tell us that it was caused by a solid lump of gas, something like carbon dioxide, the same as dry ice. And when it hit the Earth, the reverberation went all the way around the world, all the way as far as England. Well, that's a pretty decent thump in my books. You look down there at that vegetation, and she's pretty sparse. There's a lot of spinifex down there, an awful lot of it, in fact. A few gum trees, a few acacias, and that's about it. Over there's a bit of a track winding in. Vehicle track. I reckon it might be worth driving down there.
When you drive through the middle of something like this, you can't help but feel just how old this country of ours is.
See that there? That's that lump of spinifex resin. Had a leak in this jerry can. That'll be about 2 years ago now. I guess if I bought something out of a shop at the time, put that on, probably would have fallen to bits by now. This spinifex produces a resin, the same stuff that I used to fix up the jerry can back there. And that resin's flammable, so that when you light it, it burns with a great intensity of heat, which is pretty good for lighting the billy, particularly when you haven't got much firewood around the place. Spinifex itself and the way it evolves and lives and dies and things like that is quite interesting, because
It starts off very small, and then gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the clump ends up like this one here, about that big. When it gets to that stage, it dies off, starting in the middle, and gradually the death area moves further and further out. These little bits out here will finally break off and form separate clumps themselves. The other interesting thing about this stuff is that it's fire tolerant. In other words, you can set fire to it now, come back in a year or so's time, and it's grown back up again because the roots under the ground survived the heat. While the bully comes to the boil back there, I'll show you something over here. I saw these driving in. There's a few of them around. There's one just here. Yeah, have a look at that. That's a thing called the hairy caterpillar's nest. It's also called the itchy caterpillar. That casing there, that nest, is filled up with caterpillars, and you want to avoid them at all costs, because if they drop on you or if you touch the casing, you'll get hives and itch and irritate, and they're terrible things. I've bumped them a few times, and I can tell you it's something you wouldn't enjoy. But even that, Aboriginal people found a use for. In times when food was very, very scarce and they're hard up, they'd get those caterpillars, take them out, cook them up on the fire very quickly, and then eat them. If you think I'm going to do that, you've got another thing coming, I can tell you. With fires in wintertime, it's not unusual that people do get burnt, and the casing from that nest is also bush medicine. What they did was they'd get the casing and separate the inner part from the outer part, and just get that middle bit in the middle and put it on the burnt area of the skin. They'd use it pretty much the same way we'd use plastic skin. But the real message is, leave them alone. Don't touch them. Avoid them at all costs. They're terrible things. Might even be able to pick up a few ints out of here if I'm lucky. You know, it's amazing when you think about it, just how much water you go through out in the bush. You got your washing and your shaving, of course, if you shave. Your cooking and what you drink. And out here in this desert country in the middle of summer, with a hard day's work, you go through 5-6 litres a day. Now, if your body's using all that water up, you've got to replace it. And it makes you ask the question, how would you get on if you were stuck out here? Where would you find the water? Hear that? Hear that sound? Sound means water. Might have to dig for it, but the water's got to be around here somewhere. There they are. Quite a few benches over there, quite a few hundred, I'd guess. Those finches are all grain eaters. They eat the grass seed around the countryside here, and because of that, they won't range out any more than about 1 kilometre out from water. So wherever you find finches, you know that there's got to be water close by. We'll go in and have a look. Now that's a good sign. You get this sort of thing. That one there, that looks like a kangaroo track to me. You can see where he's dragged his tail along the ground. You get this where you've got water because all the animals from around the country have got to come in and have a drink each day. Over there, looks like we've got emu tracks. There we go, that's emu. 1, 2, 3 toes. Another one over there, another one there. He's heading straight over there to where all those finches are. That's what they're after. All that water there. This is what you call a rock hole. It's a natural hole in all this rocky country around here because this is solid rock, and during the rainfall it drags the water together and runs down into a hole like this. These can be quite deep. I'll just show you. There's the bottom down there. So at the moment the birds and the animals are fine, but how would you get on if you came along here later on in the year in the middle of summer when this is dried out? What you've got to do is study the landscape. Have a look at the areas where the water would run to off the edge of the shelf. Well, this is the rocky edge, the lip of the whole thing, and all the water that runs over the edge here, it's got to collect somewhere. I look up there and it's a bit dry, and same down that way, but the greenest part is just around here, and this is the place that I reckon there's got to be moisture under the ground. It's a pretty healthy looking depression here. I can even see the moisture in the soil right on the surface, so there's got to be water down there. I'd reckon most of this depression has been dug out over the years, probably by the kangaroos and the animals and things like that, because they can smell the water underneath the ground and they don't dig for nothing. We'll have a go and see how we get on. That's the moisture that the animals are digging for during the dry times. Not too far down, only about 1 yard. And I guess if I left it there for a few hours, this hole would probably fill right up with water. This is one of your narcotic plants. This is an emu poison. The Aboriginal people get all that leaf structure there, crush it all up, wash it into a rock hole like that one I've just been to. Then when the emus come along and drink the water, they fall down dead. But the really interesting factor about it is that if you're going to poison water around the desert country and it's so scarce, how do you avoid killing people? Well, to fix that up, there is a very simple answer. They left a calling card. By throwing down one of the branches from the bush, the people who came up to the waterhole could tell instantly that that waterhole had been poisoned. They could also tell by the condition of the branch how long ago it happened, because as the weeks went by, the branch would begin to decay. I think it's a pretty ingenious method myself.
See this country on the left here? That's a cattle property called Mongrel Downs. Well, that's what it used to be called. I think the new owner, his missus, didn't like that name, so they changed it to Tanami Downs. Anyway, a couple of years ago, the manager ran an advert in the local paper in Alice Springs. Rain gauge for sale. 2 years old, as is, where is, never been used.
At this stage, I'm about 200 miles short of Wave Hill. And I've got to tell you, I'm really looking forward to that cricket match.
Well, I haven't gone completely troppo, but presuming you've found enough water, the next thing you've got to find is direction. There's a very, very simple little trick you can use to do that. What you need is a straight stick. Well, I've got a cricket stump, that'll do me. Bang it in the ground there, mark the end of the shadow, wait half an hour and then come back. Well, it's been a bit more than half an hour, but you can see during that time how the shadows moved right across the ground there. It's a pretty rough sort of a guide, but it's better than nothing at all. What you've got to do is imagine a bit of a line going through those two rocks down there. I just put my toes up against them. That's got to be east, that's west, and north's up there. And if that's the case, Wave Hill will be over that way. You know, this whole business of survival and bush tucker up here in the bush, it's not something you can play around with. You've got to know your subject. And to know your subject, you've got to know your country. You can do yourself a real damage if you try experimenting around the place. You take this bush here, for instance, this thing down here. That's the thing that's related to the deadly nightshade group. It's called a desert tomato. And believe it or not, you can eat it. Well, that's sort of partly true. You can eat part of it, not all of it. Just cut it open here. And it typifies what I'm talking about knowing your subject. See that there? You can eat all this outside bit, but don't eat the seeds. They're poisonous. You've got to spit them out. I guess, you know, it'd be really convenient and easy for everyone if we could make up a set of golden rules about this sort of thing, but you can't. They just won't hold water. I've heard some dreadful old wives' tales about what you can eat and what you can't eat and all the rest of it, but I haven't found one of them that's any good. I know one time there I heard a bit of a yarn a way back that you could eat the same sort of things that birds eat. Well, that's not true, because I've seen some birds eat some terrible things. Those seagulls back there, I guess they've been eating dust for the last couple of 1,000 miles. It's probably about time we got to Wave Hill, I reckon. again.
How are you, mate?
Good.
Long trip?
Oh, it's been a few weeks anyway.
Where's me seagulls?
In the trailer.
Jamie?
You want them?
Yep, they're right.
All right. I haven't seen him for a while.
We're down to our last seagull, mate.
Have you? There's a few in here. Might be knocked around a bit, but they don't matter.
Been a bit dusty for them in there.
We've been eating dust for the last one. There you go.
Oh, good man.
How's that?
With you, we could rely on you, Les. What a bloke.
There you go. There's one down here somewhere. Oh, look at this bloke. Having a scratch.
That's a beauty, mate.
Look at the police car. Isn't it?
You've done well again, Les.
Number 2. Jerry. The Australian bush by itself is interesting enough, but when you add to it the people who live here and the sense of humour they have, then that's really what makes it.
Frankie Dalton, how are ya? Mongrels wave your whips are going.
Well, we'll see about this after the game. We're going to have a little wager on the game.
Geez, Frank, this is as hard as concrete, this thing.
Certainly is, mate. I think some of these cracks could open up. I think we better get in and have a bat straight up, I think.
Not a bad idea.
Frankie Dalton, good luck.
Gavin? Yep.
Les, all the best.
Righto. Your call, Les.
Okay.
Charles.
Well done.
And who won that toss? Hiddens, obviously, because he's coming out to bat now with his partner, Frankie Dalton. And a great reception from both sides, pretty anxious to see their players out there in the middle. Now we have Hiddens in strike. It's a lusty shot. He should bring him 2. It's gone out towards the fieldsman, and he'll take an easy 2. And we see the inevitable dog arriving on the scene, but that's happening here. The heat telling a story with the amber fluid flowing and a very enthusiastic crowd. That's a bit lucky. He went across the line of the ball and it skied high in the air, but it fell safely. Dalton strikes, and it's a Dougie Walters shot as he puts it away past mid-wicket, and they've taken 1. Hiddens looking anxious to get out of that strike, and he's turning now. He's on his way for a 3rd, and he'll make it all right. And that he does. So 3 to Dalton. Hiddens again. And he skied that one, and it's going to fall safely, I think, and it does. He's off for 1 and makes it. He was a bit lucky there.